All right, everyone. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's February 9th, 2022. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator, and that means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team while showing them the ropes. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format's very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. We host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded. We'll automatically post a recording of this session to our YouTube channel. So if you enjoy the content and want to support it, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going over to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. So with that said, let's kick it off. A few announcements. I would love any more announcements you guys could share. You tee those up. But to get started, one that was brought up to my team is that Datadog, I don't know when it was announced, but it was new to us that Datadog has ventured into cloud cost management, a la like Spot.io or NetApp or one of the many other players in the space. It's nice because you get then the single pane of glass of your cloud spend layered with other scaling events happening in your infrastructure and so forth. It'd be interesting if you would be able to even take this to the next degree and kind of figure out what the cost is of even serving requests and so forth of your infrastructure. So currently this is a private beta. I have no idea what the Terraform provider support is for it as well. And I'd be curious to kick the tires on this. Has anybody already taken a look at it? Nope. All right. Nope. Next announcement. Sure, anybody using Argo CD was bombarded in their Slack channels and communities with this notification. There was a pretty severe exploit or attack vector within Argo CD. The good news is it's not remotely, it has to be an inside job, so to say. You have to craft a specially constructed Helm chart, be able to deploy that to the Argo CD instance. So basically access to any repo that Argo CD is watching, and then you can take over Argo CD and control it or do what you would like with it. For that reason, it is critical in any larger team environment. If it's just you and your partner, no big deal right now. Anything anyone else would like to add to this? Nope. All right. Next announcement. This one's pretty exciting. How many times haven't you guys had to do something like AWS S3 sync, run it in a screen on an EC2 instance, and check on it every day for maybe a week or two while you're trying to replicate the assets between two buckets? Well, no more. You can finally do native S3 batch replication across buckets in S3 with this announcement. Haven't seen how to actually go about doing it, but it is a much needed thing. It's a very important thing, like if you're doing any kind of migrations between AWS accounts or migrating to new buckets that you provision possibly with Terraform and so forth.
I just wanted to add, the way this is different from the previously existing same region replication and cross region replication, which some people may have been using, is that this is for even existing objects.
Exactly.
Not only as new objects are written. So the SRR and CRR is only when you write a new object, then it replicates it.
Yep, that's a really good distinction. I forgot to call that out. So I mean, S3 has supported native replication for some time, but it's only as new objects are written. So this is how you would replicate the backlog of items that exist.
I thought they had an existing object replication.
Yeah, but that's what we were just talking about. So they do have existing object replication, but it's only for new objects created. If you had an existing bucket. Yeah.
I mean, for objects that exist before you enable replication, they had a way, but it didn't work very well. So we had this problem recently where we were replicating and the policy was wrong, so they failed. And Amazon said they have an immutable bit they set on their side that says replication failed, and they will never try to replicate it again. So then we had to use S3 inventory and batch jobs to do the replication manually. It was a big pain.
Yeah, that sounds like a real big pain. Yeah, I'm not sure what that option was previously. I've just used AWS S3 Sync Reply.
Yeah, that's horrible. Whenever we tried it, it timed out because there's millions of objects.
Yeah, exactly. Or you hit
And our
rate
session
limits
expired.
and yeah, and whatnot.
So do you think, can you hear me?
Yep, I'm
Yeah.
clear.
So do you think that this could be like a middle step going toward, because I know that AWS is going to enable the backups for S3, and it's currently in preview, how they say, like a preview feature. They presented that in 2021 December.
Oh, reInvent.
So, sorry?
That was a reInvent, right?
Yeah. So I was thinking maybe this could be like a temporary thing to have a backup in another region. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds plausible.
That's great.
Yeah. All kinds of things. Like you might have another bucket in a totally separate org, and for DR, or worst case scenarios, you want to just replicate everything over. Could also be an interesting way to syndicate data. If you're some kind of a enterprise SaaS company or producing mounds of data that you want to distribute to your customers without giving them access to the original copies. And it's a brilliant thing for Amazon. I mean, like, why not enable things that allow people to double their storage costs? All right, and yeah, just the last one, just a friendly shout out again. Spacelift was gracious enough to upgrade our SweetOps Slack community. I'm tremendously grateful for this. It's enabled lots of things like huddles and unlimited messages and retention here. So check it out. You have access to all like 300,000 messages now. We also broke 5,000 users this past week, so very excited about that. It's a new milestone. Cool. Let's check this chat. Any other announcements? Yeah, the replication here. Oh, you were able to pull up the old announcement here. What was that about? Replicating existing objects between S3 buckets.
Yeah, so if you scroll down far enough, you'll see a screenshot where it's like a tick box for all objects versus existing.
Yeah, the blog post.
So I'm really confused what this new feature is, other than maybe it works.
If you, in the fourth paragraph, it talks about the distinction. So it was weird because in the blog post, it doesn't make the distinction. It doesn't acknowledge the fact that there is this feature you're talking about that we're looking at right now of SRR and CRR, where you can just toggle all objects, but it does talk about it'll replicate all objects regardless of their status. So if they failed replicated previously, which is what you were alluding to as well.
Yeah,
when you were saying that feature wasn't working well for you.
Yeah, Amazon has a habit of fixing problems as soon as we've already worked around it.
Just slow down.
Yeah, I guess so.
They'll get to it eventually. Yeah. All right. Can check the office hours Slack, see if there are any other announcements in there.
The app runner getting VPC support.
Oh yeah. So that was another one. Somebody want to recap this one? That's you, Vlad.
Oh, you want me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry for my audio. So app runner got VPC support. Previous app runner, for folks that don't know it, it's basically uh, Amazon Elastic Beanstalk v2 or ECS on Fargate, but easier. And it's awesome. I think it's going to be the way to run most containers in 2023-ish. And on its way there, it got VPC support. Previously, you couldn't connect to any resources inside of VPC. So no Redis, no Elasticache, no RDS databases, no such things. You just couldn't do it. And now being yesterday, I think, they released support for that. It works similarly to how Lambdas in a VPC works. I haven't tested it, but now it's there. Woo! The service got immensely more useful.
And can you remind me or call out some highlights off the top of your head, if you have them, on like App Runner versus Dockerized Lambdas and some of the improvements to that experience?
I have a flowchart that's outdated now.
But of course you do, Vlad. Can you share that? I'll open it up.
Give me a second to get the link. Basically, you should do Lambda containers if you need Lambda's integrations. That means
Okay.
event integrations, like
Yeah.
you don't have to write the code to get messages from SQS. The message from SQS is just pushed to you. I posted the link in the Zoom chat. If you need Lambda's spike handling, and that's about it. And you should do Lambda containers if you need really, really, really big Lambdas for ML and other things like that. If you have something debatably easy, AppRunner is the way to go. The current limitation that's particularly annoying is the size. You can run at most 25 replicas of the same container, and the biggest container
In App Runner?
is in AppRunner is 4
Interesting.
gigs and 2 CPUs, I think. That should be more than enough for a bunch of apps, but it's not going to be enough if you need, I don't know how many thousands of containers running. It's awesome. It's super easy. I like it. I still think it needs some polishing and some more integrations, but it's getting there. I'm super excited about it.
That's cool.
I
Glad you
may have to
updated.
check. Yeah, I may have to check that out and see if it's worth looking at. I'm actually running a PHP Symfony app through Lambda behind API Gateway.
Yeah, so this would be a simplification of that, or like maybe if you needed to deploy WordPress or something.
Well, yeah, WordPress would have been nice. This one's just a simple Symfony app that I wrote as a single page application.
Yeah.
But in 2023, PHP will be obsolete, no, Vlad?
Smart ass.
I'm not hating on
No
PHP.
offense.
It's genuinely awesome. It's running a bunch of things out there. I don't think it's gonna go away at all.
Yep, Vlad. Yeah, Vlad Bref is exactly what I'm using. I actually had to write a Terraform provider so that I could get the Lambda layers without having to use serverless, so that I could do all of my deployment via Terraform.
Kind of disappointed you didn't choose mod Perl, but you know.
Perl's a dirty 4-letter word.
Yeah. Oh man. Anybody still maintaining any Perl sites out there? Mainstream ones?
Not in the last decade.
All right, let's get into some of the questions that were brought up. One of these came up this morning was, what are the pitfalls that one might encounter developing a feature deploying live resources namespaced by my current Git branch? So for a little bit of background, are you deploying into Kubernetes, or the namespaces Kubernetes namespaces, or like namespaces within your AWS infrastructure? And what do you mean by live?
The latter. So these would be live. These would be resources deployed like to AWS. So you slap a prefix on your S3 bucket name, just so you don't collide with things.
Yeah.
And live means that there's a credit card and it's going to a public cloud somewhere.
So there's costs associated with this. In other words, that's an interesting one. So we have typically discouraged or dissuaded companies from deploying real infrastructure for preview environments. So what we call these kind of like feature branch environments. And the reason is that you're testing different things at this stage. You're kind of testing functionality of the app. Now, if your app was the thing creating those S3 buckets, yeah, I guess you need to test the app's ability to do that. But if the app depends on S3, how can you instead mock that in some other way where you're not actually provisioning infrastructure? S3 is pretty benign case, like it's they don't really cost anything to provision. They provision very quickly. But let's take a more extreme example where you have your RDS database and it takes you, 45 minutes for it to provision or restore from a snapshot or things like that. And now you're incurring real costs, and the turnaround time for your environments is so tremendously slow. So I don't know if the expectations would be met there from availability, like ability to access that environment, that time that it takes would be satisfied. So the answer is always going to be this one I hate. Well, it depends. And what are you trying to test? And then let's go from there.
Yeah. Let's take my specific case. So thank you for answering this question in advance. I'm trying to develop some changes to some IAM policies affecting live developers and live resources that I don't own. How would I go about testing that? Like, what I have tried reading the manual, and I should probably do more of that. But how do I look at my code and say, yeah, these permissions are going to do what I think they're going to do?
Yeah, that's a fair question. Ultimately, what we see is most common is developers are developing and iterating on these things rather in a sandbox type of environment, because the feedback loop of pushing up your changes to GitHub or whatever you're using for the CI is pretty slow. So then really the separate thing is what kind of permissions do you need for this thing, which is a separate conversation. I think it's come up on office hours. How do you figure out what the lowest privileges are for some operation? And it's been, I don't off the top of my head remember it. There's been a lot of developments in the past year using like AWS IAM Access Analyzer, their tools to make that easier. And yeah, anybody else want to chime in, pick up where I left off?
Don't underestimate the cost. The cost of doing this for every pull request for most, not for all companies, but for most companies is going to very, very, very quickly spiral out of control. We have feature flags. They're a thing. They're not always a fit for everybody. There's an awesome article saying you're not ready for feature flags. I can search you for the link, but it gets expensive. It's a it's an outdated best practice from a time when we didn't have the tooling power that we have right now. And for handling stuff like IAM permissions and experimentations, yes, have an account, just do stuff in there, figure out what works, and then build it out. These should be rare. Like, these are not operations that you do on the daily. Don't try to optimize for stuff that's gonna happen once every quarter or stuff like that. That's the same reason I don't usually automate opening up AWS accounts. It happens rarely enough that a paging Confluence with steps to go through is enough. The benefit of trying to automate for black swan events is not worth it. For other companies that create AWS
unless you're us.
It's worth it.
Cloud Posse is creating accounts every day, of course. But yeah.
And you will have so many orphaned resources, and there will be Terraform bombs out because you're doing development. It's gonna orphan resources. So you're gonna have a strategy to kind of clean this stuff up. And that strategy isn't actually Terraform. It's using one of the 10 tools to nuke an account. And then you got to decide on what you're nuking, and only nuking resources that are stale, and making sure you have that account infrastructure in place for that. So it's going to be a separate account under your organization where you do that.
My friend just showed me a bash script he wrote that interrogates the AWS CLI to find all the commands underneath AWS help, and then basically automatically does a describe on each one of those things, and then iterates through that thing and does a delete. And he was working on that. So he was saying like it's basically self-updating where it will delete everything in your account, but he hasn't open sourced it yet. So I'm trying to encourage him to either open source it or let me open source it. So
Yeah, that's the big problem is, and we've had that problem with some of my past environments where I've worked in, where they've actually had each of the feature branches running up its own environment through the CICD where it spins it up. The problem that was that they never added anything in there to clean up afterwards. So it kind of got up there. They worked on their feature branch. It finally got merged in, but it never got cleaned up.
Yeah. So I'm actually also looking into issues like this. I'm on a platform team, and we've had, asked to have this sort of thing. And what we say is like, well, if your services are properly decoupled, you should be able to develop them mostly in isolation until until you're ready to go to staging. But there's legacy situations where the coupling is just impossible to resolve in the short term. And I wonder, because I also worry about what you're saying about well, if we just start spinning up all these PR environments, we're going to have all these extra costs incurred and difficulty to manage. But what about just spinning them up for long enough to run some targeted integration tests and then tearing them down like during the PR build? Is that something anyone's tried and has less concerns about? Any thoughts there?
I mean, so that's what we're doing with our automated testing infrastructure.
Yeah.
But it only works such that your tests are automated themselves. If it's expecting a person to go along and check it out, that's where you run into problems.
yeah, and you can also run into problems if like your stand up and or tear down scripts or Terraform or whatever you're using crash, and there isn't some sort of recovery or retry, you end up with orphaned resources out there that you never know about until you get your AWS bill, basically. And then you're like, oh crap, what is this? And you didn't realize that your integration tests ran 25 times, and then they broke 23 out of the 25 times, and you've got 25 or 23 RDS clusters like running out there somewhere, that like that kind of stuff happens. And
So
you're like, whoa, that was a big bill.
Periodically sweeping for the old ones, like by tag or something, like make sure they're not still there.
Yeah. So
we did we used like Cloud Custodian or something to catch the tags, see anything that had like feature in its name, and remove all resources associated with it. But then you potentially had some CloudFormation or a Terraform state file or something that would be left behind.
There are
I
several
need a feature flag to the feature flag because hey, I have this environment, but I don't want this one to be deleted. Like we're not saying that there aren't ways to do this. There are ways to do this. It's just it gets ridiculously complicated and ridiculously expensive very, very fast. And it's not a process that can easily be stopped. Like it snowballs. Developers want per branch environments because it allows them to move faster. PMs want environments per pull request because it allows them to check out in progress features. And it's very hard to go back after, 3 months of having this in production and being like, yeah, sorry, our AWS bill is now 100 times bigger. We have to stop doing this. That's not something that can be easily delivered. Also, specific to Ray's issue, if you have legacy services that cannot be developed individually, you don't necessarily have to have a pull request for that. You can also test against staging. So you have a developer environment that's using the staging URL or the staging instance of a service that's depending on. There are ways to do this not at the infrastructure level, but at the application level. Talk to your devs. Trying to solve these problems at a pure operations and infrastructure level is creating a lot of pain, and it's destroying company velocity. If every single time a developer wants to work on a feature, they have to create a pull request and wait 45 minutes for a cluster to be spun up because they can only work on an isolated environment, that's going to very, very quickly destroy your velocity and then spiral across the company.
I really appreciate y'all your insight on this, Vlad.
It's
Yeah,
a good note on
Good.
thinking about the feedback loop between iterations. This is something we've done at SlideShare. Another consideration is like, are you spinning up a full stack for a preview environment? Do you need to be spinning up a full stack for a preview environment? One of the things that we do at SlideShare is we don't spin up a full stack for our preview environment. So we just deploy the new version of the app and we connect to our staging database. And that's where we run our tests. So that doesn't 100x our AWS bill at all. We do have the same issue where sometimes the delete workflow fails to complete, but once a month, once a quarter, I run a script. I find those environments, I delete it. It's not a big deal. It doesn't 100x our bill. And I saw it fail and lot and destroy companies.
Yeah, that was me
depends on
apologizing for having such strong opinions, because I've seen this implemented in companies fail and have absolutely disastrous efforts. And I'm not disagreeing. It can work. Like if you're just doing web apps and you can do that with Vercel or Amplify Cloud Hosting or GitHub Pages, do it. Those are free. You don't care about those. If you have a small stack that can be easily decoupled from everything, like right now Jim has with SlideShare, that's awesome. But know your limitations.
Well, again, it's not about limitations, I think, as much as it's about scoping. And scoping and creating workflows that really improve the feedback loop for developers. I mean, that's our goal, right? That's one of the things we do as DevOps engineers, developer operations, right? So as long as we're delivering feedback loops that really work for the developer, we should try out different techniques. But the best way to manage risk and to manage costs is to understand scoping, how much value we get from where we put the levers and the automation. I think Matt was cut off a couple of times in this conversation, and I wonder if you had something to add.
Calhoun?
Matt Go? Sorry.
Yeah, he might have had to drop for a customer call. Last thing, shameless plug, thing that's brought up many times here is cost, and waiting until it's too late to find that out, which is when you get your bill. Amazon has obviously budgets. They're easy to set up enough through the UI. No one ever does. We created the Terraform module, among many other people who have, but that implements it, makes it very easy. So now it's standard issue for us to set up the budgets for each account when we provision it. So we can draw a line in the sand. We can move it, we can change it, but this is when we then get notifications that we're going above the spend we had expected to, and doesn't require Datadog private beta access. So I shared that link in the channel too. All right, let's jump into another question. It was asked here. Let's see. Question one, Nija, is it possible? We actually have. You asked this other one before I get to your new question, Nija. Did you ever figure out how to get those response times optimized for HTTP2? Did you get past that?
Hey, unfortunately, no. Not fully. And actually, the second, I think this question is actually related to it, because we were able to isolate that we think that the caching is like just the act of caching is adding some overhead rather than just HTTP2.
So that's why you were curious about
all of that stuff.
This one. So serving the response even before writing to cache.
Yes.
Like lazy caching, kind of. See here, what did Jonathan?
You're looking at. You said it's.
I'm looking at the wrong one here. Yeah. Yeah, okay. The second part here of the first question is kind of where you were stating that. So is it possible to set CloudFront to cache an image only after it's responded to the client request? The normal behavior is to cache the image before it's been sent to the client, but I'd like to delay until after. Did you, by the way, did you explore this with any other CDNs? I think that was one of our other suggestions, was to try using like CloudFront and just see if you got, sorry, Cloudflare, and see if you had different behavior, or Fastly.
Actually, I didn't try that. Okay, I guess. Okay, I'll try. I'll try that next, maybe tomorrow or something.
Yeah.
For context, my short answer was, maybe there is a way, but just from our experience, CloudFront allows you to customize some behavior using Lambda at edge. So there's a specific cycle of events that happen. You know, when the viewer request is received, but before the request is sent out to the origin, and then a couple more, and then finally the response back to the viewer, using Lambda at edge. And I think they also have CloudFront functions now, which is 2 out of the 4. They're simpler, but it's only 2 out of the 4 that you can customize. But you can add extend behavior and things that can happen at each stage, but you can't change the order of them, at least with CloudFront. So that was the answer. So see if other CDNs might be more flexible, but as far as I know, at least.
Akamai definitely can do that. It's called, they call it, funny enough, that's a feature that I was requesting when I used to work with Akamai quite a lot, and they call it layer 2, where you can, before the CDN requests to the origin, the object, it will actually check that, will do certain amounts of checks if you wanted to against the object before it actually puts it in the cache. And while it does that, the edge server that does the request will actually add an ID, a client ID, to the object. And once all those checks passes, then it will actually upload to the general cache the object that is pre-cache in between. It does it that way so that, you know, it has the object already, and then after those checks are checked, it doesn't have to request the object again if the object is the same. So you can do a few things in between, which is similar to what VSL in Varnish you can do, because you have the fetch and request, and in the VCL request you can actually do those checks. You can even write C code in between to be able to do all those stuff before it gets sent to the cache, and then end up being a cache hit, basically.
So Fastly might be an option for CDN.
Fastly can do it for sure. Yeah, because Fastly uses Varnish. Yeah.
And we implemented the same strategy on Cloudflare for Cloud Posse's implementation there. So we always serve a stale cache so that we can just have faster performance.
Okay, thanks for these ideas. Yeah, I think I'll have to try these other services to see how if I can achieve the same thing.
Is the problem you're experiencing with the caching? Is it if it's not in the cache, or if it's in the cache but it's being updated?
No, if it's not in the cache. So like once it's cached, so we get the you know, like this. Yes, it's the miss, exactly. It's not the hit, it's on the miss, yes.
But keep in mind that a miss can mean different things. It can be a miss because it's expired, and then you want to fetch and serve the fresh one. Or this is why I forget, there's a better term for it. I forget what it's called, but basically where you serve stale while refresh or something.
The cache refresh, state. When it's actually, while refreshing, waiting to get the object, it will serve that piece before. And usually that's disabled by default, by the way. Most of the CDNs that disable by default, but which is basically what you mentioned as lazy caching, of like use the stale object if I cannot get yet the new one.
Yeah, which will reduce it a lot, assuming the edge is caching your objects long enough that you can even do that. For sites that aren't that busy, you'll have problems with that. So like we had that problem with Cloud Posse. So I just, in the end, have it store all the assets actually in their distributed data store so that they don't actually cycle out and expire. So I get to control the cache behavior that way. You have another good question. We got the answer for, is it possible to set two origins, both our S3 buckets, as part of a CloudFront behavior? The idea is that if file is not present in one, the other is checked. We do have in our module, I know, support for failover region, but I don't know if it's at a per object basis, basically that it can try one bucket and then try the other bucket for that same object. Jonathan, does it work that way?
I got to review it. I haven't touched that specific use case. I remember I implemented that use case for a customer a few months ago, so I can't really remember exactly how it works off the top of my head. But I think the way it works is if you're, our model supports creating origin groups. So you can set like the primary origin, the failover origin. And you can also set the HTTP status codes that will have CloudFront then quote unquote fail over to the failover origin. So if it's I guess if it's a 404, then
exactly
it'll do that, but you should I gotta review it.
Okay, just quick question, or maybe something I should clarify. When this happens, does CloudFront cache the asset that's coming from the failover bucket? Because for some more background, the setup here is it's for serving videos which have been transcoded. So basically we have an input bucket, which people upload videos to. And then we have an output, which like after a video is uploaded, it gets transcoded and placed in the output bucket. However, in the time that it takes to do the transcoding, someone might request the video. So what I'm thinking is, if we have a way to fall back to the original video if the transcoded one isn't available for whatever reason, without caching the original. So it's like, if someone requests it while the transcoding is happening, we'd want to serve the original video, but we don't want CloudFront to cache the original video, because everyone who comes after that, we'd want them to see the transcoded one. So would that work with this?
You should be able to set the origin cache TTL, no? The origin just needs to respond with how long that object should be cached for, and it should just have a very short TTL of like 10 seconds or something.
Or invalidate the cache when you finish transcoding manually.
Yeah, or that, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, let me just note these down. So for the TTL, it's only going to be set on the original one. It's not going to be set for even the transcoded one. It's just like when responding with the original one, set a short TTL.
Yes, exactly. You got it. And the when you have the transcoded ones, those can those would respond with a longer TTL.
Right.
Okay. You can set that as metadata on S3 objects, right? Is that how it works?
Yeah, well, you can definitely set metadata on S3 objects. There are some restrictions. I assume TTL is one that's permitted, but I can't guarantee that.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think that's how you would do it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's I think that might just do the trick, because I was initially thinking about like creating an entirely different behavior which would be used specifically for getting the original videos, and it felt quite cumbersome. But I think this TTL and validating of the cache are probably much more elegant.
Yeah, much simpler.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's see. Oh, sorry, go on.
I just posted a link to a AWS how-to guide on invalidating a specific object in CloudFront origin. So I don't think you need to create a failover origin for this. Just I would explore invalidating it, as you just mentioned.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. I will definitely check that out.
I forgot how fast invalidations are. I mean, CloudFront is pretty slow for a lot of operations.
It depends on how
have they sped that up?
Invalidated.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're trying to invalidate the whole site, then it can take a while. If you're only trying to invalidate a specific path or a specific file, it might be faster. But yeah, it is slow because it has to when you invalidate it, it's invalidating it on all the edge environments, not just, so it takes time to go through and check everything and invalidate it.
And yet Cloudflare can do it in like a nanosecond and CloudFront takes minutes.
Yeah, because
So-
that's what I have. I have a few of my static pages sites that are deployed in S3 and stuck behind CloudFront, that I just have it set up to invalidate the common paths from the distribution is when it gets pushed out through the automation.
Yeah. This is, by the way, what Google says 60 to 300 seconds is the advertised amount by Amazon.
Okay.
Shut this down.
So I'm not sure if that's tenable for your content. If I had to be 60 seconds before the.
Oh, well, I mean, for me, it would just be provided that there's a video to actually serve, because the problem you're trying to solve is that there's no video available. So, if it's the original or if it's the cached one for 60 seconds, I mean, it
That's
probably
fine.
takes 5, maybe 6 seconds. Yeah, so it's fine.
All right, cool. Let's see.
Thank you guys for these great ideas. Let's try here.
Yeah, great teamwork. Thanks, everyone. Let's see. Any other questions we got? I'm looking in the Zoom chat. And office hours.
Yeah, I had something.
Fire away, Ray.
I've been thinking a lot about refactoring Terraform over time, and I wonder if there are any automated tools people are using for that. And I'm having some I'm putting in some effort trying to roll my own. So I'm curious if there are tools people are using, and if there's any things they just wish they had right now.
It's a great question.
I've got one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's the updates in 1.1 that are huge in terms of refactoring within an existing Terraform project, and you're not trying to move state between two root modules. So if you haven't seen those, that really helps in regards to just adding count to a module or adding count to a resource. You can kind of do that with its own
like a mapping language
HCL migration. Yeah. It's basically a block that will allow you to say, hey, I renamed this resource or I renamed this module. And that's in 1.1.
Were just huge. That was a huge improvement.
That makes it a lot easier. The thing that's still painful is obviously the moves between two state files, two different root modules. And that I don't think anybody has actually done a good job of. I've looked at a lot of different tools. I do this a lot for my clients, both because early on I didn't know what I was doing, and I made root modules that were too big, and also I've inherited some applications that
you shouldn't take all the blame. They've made many changes to how they recommend things be done over the years, and this is terrible.
That's a good point. Yeah. But the issue of moving between them, I mean, I think everybody has their bash script that does it. I can share you. I can share in SweetOps Slack, like one of the bash scripts that I've used that I just run through Spacelift as like a migration script. But there's a bunch of tools that are out there. None of them seem to do it well. There's a new one that I'll link in the Slack as well that does it, but it looks overly complicated and doesn't seem to be doing it at the level I would want it to happen at. But yeah, I think that piece is still not fixed and still not actually ready to go. But is that what you're referring to in terms of refactoring?
That's a good example. Yeah, I mean, just like the Martin Fowler book on refactoring, all those patterns of things you can do. That for Terraform, can we extract a module? Can we rename things safely without have the references update? Like one of the first things that I implemented was like, okay, can we rename something and update all the references and add the moved block? And make that kind of streamlined. But I'm just sort of starting to think about this problem. And yeah, if there's already another project that's started on the way, I would just contribute to it. But if not, I'm taking a try.
Yeah, I've tried using moved in my Terraform code as well, and it works fine, except for one of my modules where I went from using count to using for each, and it wasn't easily able to be translated, or at least I was not able to figure out a way to get it to translate using a moved block. But for simple stuff, I've had no problems where I've renamed the resource and I've just put a moved block in, or I've moved it out of being a resource and used a module instead, and just moved that resource to the module.
I see the link to TF migrate, and I've really loved that one. I use it a little bit of a modified way. Like before the moved blocks, that was the only way, you know, we were getting a clean plan, you know, but before we, without having to do a state operation like during PR stage. So that was TF migrate is really good, and the moved blocks have made up for maybe part of having that, but I think that's still a really useful tool.
It's cool. I hadn't seen Terraform yet.
Yeah, that just came out, and I, you know, right after thinking it, I do say I'm not sure how big of a utility this is. I mean, I read this README at like late at night, but after reading the README, I was like, you know, you're not doing that much for me. You're basically providing a little bit of sugar here, but it seemed confusing and wasn't exactly what I was looking for. I want something to be way more plug and play than what this provides. Really, we need to fix these problems at the Terraform core level. Like they need to provide a solution, and that's why the moved block is awesome. It is getting to like the root issue that, hey, we can't do refactorings without, you know, a bunch of crappy bash scripting. And now we have moved, and that helps on one side of the equation, but we need it to be cross root module, because best practice would be don't have one root module for all your resources. So I believe they do have a issue. Let me try and look that up, but I believe there's a issue in the Terraform repo that talks about cross state file refactoring. And that would be what we should all be upvoting, right?
Yeah, I like that. If I can find that Terraform issue, and I wasn't familiar with Terraform either, so thank you for sharing that.
By the way, Matt, something's up with your audio, so every now and then you sound digitized.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah,
Weird.
It's good.
Sorry.
Right now, though. Yeah. Huh. Let's see. Any other questions? We are reaching the end of our hour. Oh, we got a TF refactor link here. Ray is sharing. Cool.
Yeah, so this just has a couple of features so far, but this is like, you know, my attempt to say, like, this is the thing I wish that I had, and it looks like Valet may have some overlap. So I'm glad I know about that now.
I think, but the key thing is that you're going to have specific use cases like this, and that's what the tools are going to do. It's just coming up with what those are that you run into, codifying them in an app like this, but solving like the generic case where you could almost have the TF refactor JQ equivalent. I think that would be an ambitious implementation. Maybe that's what it should be. It should just be a TFJQ. And there you go. Since we all know JQ inside and out.
With its notoriously easy syntax.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's always easy.
Yeah, I never to look at the event page for JQ. It's just intuitive.
Especially to do the same thing I looked up yesterday. But it is really, really great though. And I feel like there is some kind of extract language for infra's code or I don't know. There's something I've seen like that, and I cannot remember its name right now.
Yeah, I always have the JQ Play website up so I can figure out those syntax.
Anybody here read Mandarin?
Yeah, it's my second language.
Yeah. Yeah, so it looks like TFJQ project is available. You heard it here first. Joking. All right, other questions we can get to, everyone?
I had something quick. I don't know if you even want to
Yeah, go for it, Jonathan.
bring this up, but so if you open up Terraform AWS components, I know we're not ready to like support this or anything, but I kind of want to get really just quick high level feedback on the idea of mixins. Is that something we can quickly take a look at? I have a pull request here.
Yeah, no, we should, let's set the pretext for it today and then talk about it more next week. This is a pattern that we're starting to adopt. I think we brought it up at some point in one of our office hours, but we can talk about it some more. Many languages have this concept of mixins. It's kind of, you can have a library of reusable drop-in functionality that kind of enriches your current functionality of like a function or a class or something. In the case of Terraform, there's no native support for mixins, but it is very easy to do, mock the concept of a mixin. And that's what Jonathan has done here. So the idea is that you could define, like in this case, a mixin. What is this? This is the README here. Here, a mixin for I'm gonna pick another one, maybe introspection. So here are some standard tags you might want to enforce in every one of your modules, and some variables then to implement it. So here's a mixin. We would just drop into a module and get those for free. So creating a centralized repo of those, and then where do you want to take it from there, Jonathan?
SOPs might be a good one too at the bottom there. The SOPs mixin near the bottom. So like the purpose of this is that we found that some of our components, like let's say you want like we want to support the SOPs operator, and this creates a Kubernetes manifest for the SOPs secret, and we end up adding this custom support in a bunch of our EKS components, for example, and then our components are just not very dry. So the idea is you just have these files that are going to be the same everywhere. They come from a centralized repository, which I guess like we this is like fully just like an idea, right? But I guess it would be in Terraform AWS components, and you would just copy it down from here and you drop it in rather than having any repetition in every component. They would have this .mixin.tf file that is basically like you don't touch it, kind of like context.tf, which we use in our components as well.
Which was our very first mixin. We just didn't know it was a mixin at the time, but it's a mixin. Is our context.tf file. So, I mean, like one of the first responses might be, well, stick this stuff in a module. Yeah, we can dry this up a little bit, sticking it in a module, but it doesn't reduce the fact that there's still going to be a lot of boilerplate for all the variables and the module invocation itself. And that's the purpose for the mixin.
This looks awesome. How are you planning on, adding it? Is it going to be an Atmos command that runs against the mixins, and then, the root module would declare, I want X, Y, and Z mixin?
Yeah, kind of. So we first want to let this pattern burn in and manifest itself as a convention in Terraform. So that's why we've been talking about it more and introducing it. We're going to be adding it to Atmos for sure, as part of the schema in the stack config that you could specify dependent mixins that you need for a module. But before we go that far, I think we want to just suss out, see how well it works and what the use cases are. Right now, having a mixin for security groups, having a mixin for the context, having a mixin for introspection, for the SOPs pattern here are the ones that we've come up with so far.
I would definitely kick the tires on it. I could use it for a couple clients.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Cool. Well, we are at the end of our time today. Let's bring this up again next week and talk about it some more, because I think it's a very useful pattern for Terraform, and even using Helm file or Kubernetes charts or other things, they could use this pattern. So we'll talk about it then. All right. Well, if you guys haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, head over to youtube.com/cloudposse. We'll syndicate today's episode, as well as our whole back catalog of episodes of Office Hours is available there for streaming. You can also tune in to our podcast at podcast.cloudposse.com and listen to our Office Hours however you listen to podcasts. I love connecting with everyone in our community. If you haven't already added me on LinkedIn, go to linkedin.com/in/Osterman and look forward to connecting with you there. We host these calls every week. Our next session will be next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific. You can register for our Office Hours and get an invitation and invite and all that stuff by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Same time, same place.